Hello and welcome to the Meet Your Species podcast. My name is Heath, and today we had a very special guest. This is Jessyca Holland. She is a director and co-founder of C4 Atlanta, which is a company that focuses on connecting art entrepreneurs, people who want to have a career in the arts, to the tools and experience and just whatever they need to actually make a proper career. It's a very interesting program. I came across it when there was a seminar they had on, I think, healthcare, and this was back in 2014, I think, and they had a session on, I think it was the healthcare plan. This is when the Affordable Care Act was passed and everyone had to get on plans. So they had a whole presentation on exactly how to go about it, and like all the details. It was very helpful. And so I got to know Jessyca, and she agreed to sit down for one of these podcasts, which was lovely, and I learned a lot, and I really I enjoyed getting to know her and her story and what this company does, because it's very interesting. And now it's been so many years since then. This is 2020. So they've been still hard at work, and I think you will find this podcast very interesting. So with that, I give you Jessyca. Oh, and before, I just want to mention, we filmed this in the building that they were at the time, and there was, lots of work going on in the background. I didn't realize how much echo there was and background noise. I tried to fix the audio as best I can, but please forgive me for that. But anyway, without further ado, I give you Jessyca Holland. Welcome, Jessyca. Let us dive in. So, I like mostly to start with past, just so people can get to know you. So, what was your childhood?
So, what?
Your childhood,
Childhood? Oh, okay. Wow, we're going way back.
Just so people can kind of get a feel for how you think.
Sure.
What were your experiences?
I came from, we grew up, formative childhood, I guess, was mainly 80s, 90s. So I'm sort of a product of the end of the Gen X generation and right before the millennial generation. So right there on the cusp. I came from a relatively large family, and my parents weren't Catholic or anything like that. That was the first question we always got, like, why do your parents have so many kids? There were 5 of us, which, growing up in that environment, you don't really think about having a lot of brothers and sisters, but this was at an age, I think, when people were maxing out at 3 kids.
Right.
There was always a lot of activity in the house, and it was my mom who was staying home mostly with the kids and was always trying to find unique things for us to do, mainly to get us out of the house.
Of course, she can clean or whatever, right?
Yeah, or just take a break. No noise, yeah. Meditate or whatever she needed to do, but so we had a lot of outdoor activities that we did. We played outside a lot. We were very active. We engaged our imagination in play constantly. We were all over the neighborhood, and I know that's a little bit different than the way my kids have been brought up. So
was this Georgia?
This was Georgia, yeah. So I grew up in Gwinnett County. So I am a Metro Atlanta native, and went to school mostly in Georgia. I think there was about a 6-month period where I lived in South Carolina, and then we had moved back. So graduated, went to school in Georgia, went to school in West Georgia. So started acting when I was 7. Started my first acting class. That was one of the other attempts to get us out of the house. And then fell in love with it and majored, ended up majoring in it in college. So.
Okay, in performing arts?
In performing arts, yes.
Nice.
Yeah. At the university level, they make you do everything. So you stage manage, build sets, and all that. But my primary love was working on the script as an actor.
Interesting. What was it that drew you to that?
It was probably one person, a guy named Joe Catalanato, and he was one of the first people that offered acting classes in Gwinnett County. And I think it was, we started out doing improvisation exercises, and it's different than I think what a lot of people think of as improv, which is theater sports or comedy improv. It was just a way to kind of tap into character, tap into imagination. And for a 7-year-old, it was very easy to do. There was not a lot of inhibition, and so it was just a lot of fun. That's what it was. It was a lot of fun.
Just good for around, right?
Yeah. Good for around making stories.
Like it. It's so much easier when you're a kid. I feel like the older we get, sometimes you get too solid and you have to be logical and work all the time.
Yeah.
Just letting go.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a couple of studies around that. If you go into a kindergarten class and you ask, how many of the kids in there, are you an artist? You have almost all the kids raise their hand and enthusiastically. And then by the time you move through grade school, get to the 5th grade, you could ask the same question. And by the 5th grade, you've got maybe 1 or 2 kids. You've got those kids who like to draw comics or who are always doodling a lot, who think of themselves as artists. And so it's somewhere in there where we're starting to be shifted into our perspective roles, and being an artist is a role that's been assigned to people.
Interesting. I can totally see that. It's like I think about people all the time, and I'm like, everyone seems to be against people playing games or whatever, but they don't realize that most people are playing a game anyway. That's just, I'm playing fireman, I'm playing businessman, I'm playing teacher, whatever. It's all in the game, or characters.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think acting sees it that way as well.
Yeah, I mean, I could be biased.
Yeah.
I've been an actor for a bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so native Georgia, actor, went to college here, spent a lot of time. What were some influential people along the way to help shape the way you think? Or maybe experiences?
I think, even in high school, I had a couple of theater teachers that I went to a school. It wasn't really a magnet school. Those are very popular right now, but it was a school with a very strong program. I was very fortunate to go there. A very strong program in theater. And Patty Lindahl, and I think she still heads up the drama department over at Brookwood High School in Gwinnett County, and then Jan Lindenfeld. So two people in my life that throughout high school gave me a lot of opportunities. I went to a small college. I went to the University of West Georgia, and my first year there was the first year of instructor Shelley Ellman. Now she's I think an associate professor. Yeah. But we kind of clicked, and I think she helped me with roles and with exercises that would also stretch, my abilities as a performer, but also, taught me to understand that, you do have a type, I guess, as an actor, and sometimes right out of the gate, understanding that type helps you get jobs.
Sure, because it's probably like anything else. You can try and do everything and you'll fail at everything, but if you kind of hone it in a little bit,
right,
figure out your box.
Yeah, narrowing your focus a little bit. As far as experiences, I mean,
well, let's stick with the people for a minute. So
sure.
Those people you mentioned along the way. What beyond acting stuff, did any of them help you just as a person, kind of growing and shaping how you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, Shelley Ellman, and I think when you get into college, there's this definitely. I mean, there's a separation, I think, from your parents when you start forming your own ideas. When I was 19, I got pregnant. What was that? End of my sophomore year, I found out, and that was, everybody around me thought that I needed to drop out of school, and even my parents, and they didn't mean it in that's just what they thought you did. You get pregnant in school, and so, well, that's it. You can't continue to learn, so you drop out. And I was very determined not to do that. And I think Shelley was one of those people that helped me through that because I did, actually marry the guy who knocked me up. We're still married today. We've been married for almost 17 years. And we raised a kid while we were in college. And we did that with a very strong support community. And I think,
through college.
through college, yeah, college, through family, definitely through family, his family, my family, but also through my peers, my friends, people who are part of my theater company, Shelley, helping us with things like scholarships and going to rehearsals and bringing a kid with you or a baby.
Just allowing you that freedom to
Yeah,
say.
yeah, and it was very, I know this word doesn't always have the best connotation, but it was very communal in that respect because, you would show up at a rehearsal and you'd have your kid passed around to like different people who were more than willing to be a part of that child's life. And I think that shaped my daughter as well, my oldest daughter.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, she's very comfortable with adults, very comfortable.
Interesting. There's I think there's a culture, I don't want to say specifics because it could be wrong, but there's a culture that essentially raises everyone together as a village still to this day.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the concept of these are the parents and this is the kid. It's theirs. It's everyone's responsibility.
Yeah, I think, even largely in the United States, that was a big part of the history, that if you had a mother who had passed, you still had your aunt, your cousins who were older than you to help raise you, or if your father was an alcoholic, you still had maybe an uncle nearby within, a pretty tight radius. And being spread out, I don't, I'm not going to put a value judgment on any of that, but I think that we try to find family in other ways,
Definitely. Well, we definitely need the connection,
right?
Right,
Yeah,
for
for
sure.
human beings.
And beans. Okay, so that sounds like an experience that helped shape you, I would imagine. Still going through college and all that.
Yeah, it did, and it's funny. I have to stop and think about it as an experience. It was really just kind of like that's what I did,
Right,
and
it's just
it
your
was
life.
just my life. Yeah, but I forget about that. So yeah, I ended up graduating with honors in 4 years,
Nice.
and learned how to navigate Medicaid and all of that, so I could have this child and she could be healthy.
People complain about these social programs all the time, and I understand what they're saying, but at the same time, this clearly helped you in some way.
Yeah, I don't think I'm the typical face that people attach to who are critics of those programs. And I think oftentimes people forget that, when they work, they really work, as being a stopgap. I continue to go to school. I got an education. I've been paying back to the system, for a long time, and I'm happy to do so, to provide that stopgap. And so, yeah, I think as a society, in years and years from now, we'll be judged how we took care of people who were less fortunate.
Yeah. Well, isn't that essentially the way you judge character? How one treats people who you don't perceive as having any impact on your life? So, like,
Yeah.
whether it's people on the street or whatever.
Yeah, and it's always it's not as easy as it as you think because if somebody's not in your life and except through a passing moment, it's easy to ignore that person and to walk on by. And I'll be the first to admit I've been guilty of that. Working downtown, you do see a lot of people who are in need, and it's hard too because I think there's this problem, but nobody really knows how to help it because it's so systemic.
Or even understand.
It, yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest problems.
Yeah.
Just a complete ignorance of what is going on.
Right. There's a lot of misconceptions. For example, that homeless people don't have jobs. And in fact, a lot of them do have jobs, but they don't have the kind of job that provides a home for them.
Yeah, or because they don't have an address like a PO box or anything, you can't even get certain jobs.
Right. Yeah.
Are there any other things you'd like to talk about that helped change, just kind of percolate that brain?
Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know how deep we want to go into things. I did grow up with a parent that had a mental illness, and so
Okay.
that was something that was, and it sounds weird, but it's one of those things that's beautiful and horrible at the same time. And to understand exactly how the mind works is, I think we're just getting to that point, that we're, not even from a psychological standpoint, but understanding, neurons and the function of the brain. And I think that, unfortunately for my mom, help came way too late. And and that was part of her upbringing. It was part of a Southern upbringing, that social stigma that's attached to mental illness. And you see that you have the backlash now because of all of the pharmaceutical commercials. And people are like, oh, we're all on pills. And that may be true. But I think also sometimes the society lends itself to mental illness.
Totally. I think, yeah, it's definitely a combination of things.
Right, yeah.
Because there's never one cause. It's like symptoms of root causes that we don't even understand, and then symptoms, and we try and fix the symptoms, which causes more symptoms.
Yeah.
Terrible negative cycle.
Yeah, it is. And I think, with having a parent that has that, it's painful to watch. But what it also does is it gives you the compassion for people who are in that situation, and then on the other side of that, there's a fear that kind of is always present in your life because of things like heredity, and am I doing this like mom did it, and does that, and what I found, and even going to therapy to talk about these issues, is that I'm not my mom, and I don't have those problems that she had. So but I think even as a parent, you look at your kids and you think, I wonder what, if they hit adulthood, are they going to be grappling with some of these same issues? So.
Right. So, as someone who has kids and thinks about this, are there any steps you've taken to try and make sure that you can provide as much support to your children?
I think it's not that I want to shield my children from my past, but I don't necessarily need to share every detail about their grandmother who's now passed. I think for the sake of remembering, but there is a certain honesty that I do have with them about, now that they're older, they're 12 and 16, about the things in your life, just like you probably mentioned, I have mentioned, that my grandmother had diabetes, or when my mom had diabetes, and so. There's that runs in the family. So on my husband's side, it's been cancer. So you are, even those things you're cognizant of within your children. I think for something like mental illness, I think you approach it from being honest with your kids and saying, if you ever feel like you need support or need to go talk to somebody or want that, then you provide that avenue for them, and give it, provide an environment where they feel like they can come and talk to you if they're feeling like depressed or upset. And not that this has been the experience of my children, but they have had friends who have had larger issues, with depression. And so even being able to talk about that and understand that and explore that is something that's very important for them to do.
Definitely. That's got to be a nice exposure. I mean, it's not fun going through it, especially to have everything else in school, but to see that at that age. I know for me, seeing and experiencing things that maybe some other people didn't, has helped me as an adult have a more perspective on what's serious and what's not as serious.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it makes, I feel like my daughters are very empathetic, very empathetic kids. And we all went to go see the movie The Fault in Our Stars.
Yeah, John Green's movie.
Yeah. Well, we love the book. My husband came with us too. He did not cry, but he got a little like weepy. But my daughters and I think, especially my oldest daughter, we were of course crying, and everybody got teary eyed. And I think um, when you see your children react that way, or even think about their peers at school and what they're going through, and try to um, so and so at school is acting out and he's causing a lot of trouble, and so you hear about these school experiences, and so to be able to say, well, have you ever thought about he may be struggling with something, something's going on, and then they think about it, and then hopefully, and they are a champion for that child, or at least at the very least tolerant of some of the behaviors.
Right. Understanding you're going through something.
Yeah.
Either in your capacity.
Yeah.
I like it. So let's go to the present. I like to. So now we kind of have an idea of who you are and what. So what are you doing now?
Well, almost 5 years into running C4 Atlanta, which is we're an arts organization dedicated to arts entrepreneurship. And it's a very exciting time. It's also a very scary time. When you start an organization, and Joe Winter, who's the co-founder, he and I had this conversation, I think, just yesterday. When you start an organization, you don't have a whole lot to lose. You're starting from zero, you're starting from scratch. Everything is new, everything is exciting. You get to a certain point where you're continuing to go up, and grow and grow and grow, and then you have to think about these other issues that you didn't have to think about before.
It's a longer way down.
Longer way down, definitely. There's always the nonprofit speak of things like capacity, and those are definitely things that you have to start thinking about. So, it's being able to manage all of that and think about and continue to remain optimistic, which is hard sometimes because when you're stuck in the here and now, you're not thinking about a vision 5 years down the road. So,
right. So let's dive a little bit more, just so people can really understand what C4 does. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. Yeah. We started in 2010, and one of our first classes that was started was called Entrepreneurship in the Arts, the Art of Self-Promotion. It's a very long title. Now it's called Ignite. Very similar content, but shortened. It's easier to write copy for that than it is the other one. But that class was created by Kamal Sinclair, who now works for Sundance.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but she has a performing arts background. I think was one of the original touring members of Stomp, and went to Georgia State to get her MBA. So she took a lot of that knowledge she learned in a graduate program and condensed it to this multi-week class on teaching artists how to create a business plan.
It's like an intensive.
Yeah. It's like we had one consultant that was working with us. He was actually working on his MBA at the time. He called it the MBA Light.
Yeah.
So a lot of the same concepts, I think, that you might run into in an MBA, not as deep, definitely not as deep at all. But just understanding what are the different components of writing a business plan. And the idea behind that is when you can take really the same type of creative energies that you have towards your art or your creative offering, that's what we call it in the class, or creative offering, and you put that into a plan, then you receive clarity. And so it's less about an exercise in, oh, you have to plan and go through this rigid process, and more about discovery
Right.
and understanding, there may be different ways of thinking about, for example, if you're a visual artist, your canvas could be other things besides traditional. Yeah. So we talk a lot about that. Discovering your blue ocean, discovering that ocean that is not saturated and has full of possibilities. So that was our first class, and we were able to pilot that and offer it for free to several artists. And so, just, doing that class over and over again, we got a lot of feedback. In fact, when we first started, it was a 4-week class. Now it's an 8-week class. Because some of the feedback that we got, actually a lot of the feedback that we got over and over was it needs to be longer. We need more time.
Oh, you need more. Okay.
Yeah. So
that's a good problem to have.
It's a good problem to have. So now it's an 8-week course. And then out of that, you kind of learn what are the other things that you're in 8 weeks that you're not really able to delve into. And some of that, spun off into other classes. So we have a financial literacy class, a fundraising class. So those are just kind of one-off classes that dig a little bit deeper. Mm-hmm. We have a marketing class that's 3 weeks. And then we had a program, or one of our longest running programs is a program called Tech Smarts. And it's just a bi-monthly meetup that explores technology issues in the arts. It could be anything from, using Google AdWords to how to use spreadsheets,
Right. The basics that people don't really want to learn, but once they figure out,
Yeah. Some of it's the basic stuff, and some of it we got into more complicated stuff, like looking at, for example, for performing arts organizations, CRMs. It's a CRM is like what is that? CRM. Now I'm going to forget the acronym, but I can explain what it is. It's basically like a record keeping system, a database for patrons. So when somebody comes in and they purchase a ticket, for example, at the Alliance Theater, then the Alliance Theater would, track whether that person's also a donor or whether that person has gone to different shows or multiple shows. Okay. And the idea behind it is that there's a customer service element that you can bring back to the experience because you know who this person is. They're not just somebody passing through your door.
Right.
So you're building kind of a profile
around analytics of what's going on.
Yes, analytics, data driven. And so we just explored the different systems that were out there and which have changed tremendously over the last 5 years. Yeah,
that's insane.
Yeah. So out of Tech Smarts, we asked people, what else do you want to learn technology-wise? And we got a lot of feedback when people wanted to learn about how to build a website. So we were like, well, we can't really do that in a meetup session.
Yeah, you teach them like Squarespace or something.
But not
from scratch.
Yeah,
make a WordPress.
Yeah, right. So Joe, again, my colleague, he put together the curriculum for a 3-week website bootcamp class. So we do a lot of different things. We also run a co-creation space downtown. We deliberately chose downtown. We love downtown. There's a lot of energy right now in downtown with projects that Dashboard Co-op has brought downtown, Elevate.
And this is downtown Atlanta, just in case anyone's lost.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, the ATL.
Me too.
Yeah. So it's we love being downtown, and the neighborhood is very supportive of arts happenings. I think the challenge is people still have a stigma associated with downtown,
right.
Crime and
homelessness.
Yeah. So
how do you see that? Sorry, that's my fault. How do you see that changing, or do you see it changing?
I do see it changing. I think we're at this moment where it's like it could change for the best. Mm-hmm. Or it could change for the best and then become the worst.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So I think, for us as an organization, our challenge is really to tap in more to the networks that already exist downtown. The neighborhood associations, the people who live here, the people who worship here, the people who work downtown, and we don't always have the capacity to reach out in the way that we want to. But we're trying to build programs around that would help even our artists learn how to do civic engagement projects that would that have a more organic ripple effect within the community around the arts. So I think we have to. The city of Atlanta, I think, maybe just under New York City, has one of the highest income gaps in the United States.
Not surprising.
Yeah, so you have, I mean, it's an issue. It's an issue that we have to address. So we can take all these progressive steps towards transportation, towards community development, or uh, you know, and these are great things. Don't get me wrong. Like the Pod City Market, the Atlanta Beltline, all of those things are fantastic projects. But I think also as we continue to see the possibilities around those developments, we also need to take another look and say, how do they affect everyone within the community, and how are we closing the gap with what it is that we're doing, instead of contributing to something and unintentionally that would. See, I silenced my phone. So.
Well, I set an alarm for the parking, and I want to make sure I don't.
Do you need to go? Do you need to go pay?
No, that's a text message.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Anyway, I'm sorry. What were you saying?
We need to do more better.
Do more better. Yeah, agreed. Oh, because we were talking about the Beltline.
Yeah. And again, just to reiterate, I know people who work on those projects, and it's not. Those are just some examples of development that's happening, not necessarily development that is, nefarious and intent.
They're great projects. We just need larger scale things, or more specific things, maybe. How would you describe it?
I think there needs to be real intentionality behind understanding the community. And I would say, those projects I know have gone through, a lot with consultants and city planners and things like that. But there have been some projects that haven't worked, but then people have learned from those mistakes and now are moving towards that. And I think art is one of those that, if you're working in a community and you want to go and save the community, that might be well intended, but that can also be a very harmful mindset. So,
so are there any examples of that?
It's hard to feel comfortable with doing Atlanta examples, I think.
Right.
But I think an example of what really works in another city is the Philly Mural project.
So what's that?
So it started out like years ago as a campaign to end spray paint graffiti. And the way, again, I'm probably butchering the story, but one of the ways in which that was accomplished was not by keeping street artists out of the picture, it was by including them. Because a lot of the people that worked in the program realized that the street artists were very skilled. And
beautiful.
Yes, and may not have had some of the formal training, or the formal training they were getting was on their own. They were going to the library and they were studying these, works of art on their own and incorporating some of that into their own work. Now, I'm sure that the program didn't run into, or did run into some problems. And one example might be if you go into a community and you decide to put up a mural, but you haven't talked to the community about what type of mural would represent the community best.
Right.
That can become an issue because
creating tension because they don't agree with what you put up or whatever.
Right. And I think if you're receiving public funds to go and do that work in a community, you need to include the public. Now, there's a lot of issues around freedom of speech and things like that I'm very sensitive to. But I think that it comes down to really, you can do great work with being informed by a community. And so I don't think involving a community compromises artistic integrity. I think if anything, you now have allies and supporters that will protect your work.
Right.
And that has been the case with the Philly Mural project. So a lot of them are when they go in and decide to do a mural, there's a lot that goes into that, and talking to the community, including the community. Um, and what you find is that, so if you go into a vacant lot and you have, this lot with trash and stuff in it, but you put up a mural in an adjacent building, and you've included the community, well, the community takes care of it. They make sure that the area in front of the mural isn't trashed.
Right.
So I think I think that there's efforts in this city to work towards that. But I think as far as a lot of the projects that we have, we're still in our infancy. So yes, we have a lot of walls painted, which is great. Has brought a lot of attention to Atlanta. Has done a lot of amazing things for the city. I think going back and learning from other cities, there's nothing wrong with that. I think understanding intentionality. Michael Road, who is he's a theater artist, and but does civic engagement projects in the community. One of the things that he says is that we never go in thinking that we're giving a community a voice. They already have a voice, so we're just listening, to their voice they already have.
Definitely.
So
I can dig that.
yeah.
Makes sense. So that's a great program in Philly.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be kind of cool to have a mix of that kind of setup, and then also what we have in Atlanta in the Krog Street Tunnel. Like, it just is where people go.
Yeah.
As long as there are dedicated places like that.
Yeah.
That gives people an ability to hone the craft. You can always we've been over to the month and let them start fresh.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know how the Krog Street that particular tunnel works. I think it's owned by the railroad company. I think. So definitely, if there are private companies that you get into some tricky things, like you don't want it to be all of a sudden an advertisement for a company,
right?
and that's you've got, again, in Philly, you've got private companies that are commissioning work, and so there's this really fine line on the books legally what constitutes an advertisement and what constitutes art.
Right.
So
because you don't want McDonald's.
or brought to you by Pfizer. Which they've sponsored projects in Philly before, but they're not allowed to put their name on it.
Interesting.
So that's part of the agreement. So it's kind of like live and learn. Krog Street is awesome. I would love to see more tunnels like that. The one over there on Moreland, and I think Living Walls painted one, and
they're so beautiful.
Yeah.
Living Walls.
Yeah.
I used to live at 17th and West Beach Street, and there's a building right on the corner, and they did a little side of the parking deck. It's like this huge person kind of laying down with little flowers coming out of the pipes on the side. It's awesome.
Living Walls is great, and they've done a lot for recognizing street art in Atlanta, and making it something that is
well done.
Well done, and I mean it just adds to the vibrancy of the city.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Are you familiar with the silhouette above Peachtree? Where West Peachtree and Peachtree come together?
Maybe. What is it?
It's over by the SCAD area. There's a side of a building that's got a huge silhouette of a man. It goes all the way up, and you can see it from that side, all the way up on the line station.
I have to look for it.
You'll just be like, oh, hey.
That's cool. Yeah.
I don't even know if that was a project that was just part of the building or what, but it looks awesome.
Yeah.
I love more stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think even companies are looking in for construction, maybe, and I think a lot of them do. I don't know that it's a legal requirement in Georgia, or even in the city, to save 1% for art. I think in other cities it might be like San Francisco. But
so Kansas City does that.
Yeah.
But I'm not a fan of forced art like that, because to me, what happened, some of them, because most of it's metal structures and stuff.
Yeah.
And some of them are beautiful, and some of them I'm like, you just did this
to do it. Yeah.
Well,
in Boston they have a program, and I think it's run through the Arts and Business Council, Greater Boston, and it's a a loan art project. So the artists get paid, and their art goes to corporate offices, and it's rotated through.
Okay.
So corporate offices, not wanting to basically store art and keep art. There are Coca-Cola, for example, I think has their own art curator. The CDC has its own museum or gallery. Um, but I think from some corporate offices, I think the idea of owning art isn't really that appealing, as an asset. So having a loan program where artists get paid for creating the work, or get basically like a residual or a rental fee, for their artwork is pretty cool. It seems to be very popular in Boston. So we may have something similar to that in Atlanta. I don't know for sure. I don't know who would run it, or I do know that Wonder Root has the CSA, the community supported art, which is pretty cool.
What's Wonder Root? I'm not familiar.
So Wonder Root is another art service organization. Their mission is more focused on art as a positive change for social justice. Maybe I'm getting the mission wrong, but more social justice, more community engagement.
Okay.
So they have they have had for several years off of Memorial, an art center, and it's like a small house, but it's got like a recording studio and all this stuff. You pay like a membership and you can use the facilities. But they just signed a lease with this city of Atlanta for a school building that isn't in use anymore, right across the street, and I think it's like 55,000 square feet. So they're going to have artist studios and performance.
55,000?
Yeah.
Ooh.
It's a big deal. Yeah.
That's huge.
So yeah, that's going to be really great for artists. Affordable workspace.
Definitely.
In addition to the goat farm.
I was gonna say I love the goat farm, but it's only so big. Yeah. And most of it's already covered.
Yeah. They're ready to. They have that good problem of capacity, right? Mm-hmm. But I mean, both have a different structure, and for their particular community, it seems to work really well. So it'll be, they haven't moved into the space yet, but I think that they have already, most of it leased out, or a good chunk of it leased out to artists who are already, interested in being in the space. So
good deal.
Yeah, it's good stuff for Atlanta.
Yeah, well, especially if they're already filling up, like that's a good sign.
Yeah, it is a good sign.
I like that. Okay, so I'm assuming arts, but let's kind of scoot into what issues are impacting your life or important to you in the city or in the world or whatever is most important.
Tell you things that are the most recent. Definitely art, and definitely, I think a big influence of mine over the last year has been a book called Building Communities, Not Audiences. I think the extended title is The Future Art in the United States.
So what's that?
It's about a lot of things. But the author is Doug Bork, and he also has other contributors from the arts critic field, or just other amazing people who are doing some great research and scholarship in the arts. But essentially, he dives into really understanding where our current art structure came from. Very Western, very much this patron artist model, and how essentially that's going away. And that community engagement, community-based art is sort of the future of art in the United States. And there's...
So just before we get too much further, explain, in case anyone's unaware, the patron artist
dynamic?
Yeah, how's that work usually?
I think we know the examples of like famous painters that had the patron, back in the Renaissance or pre-post Renaissance that had the patron commissioned art.
It's like whether it's the church or something.
Right, or a monarch or wealthy, someone from the bourgeois class. Yeah. So that's kind of the traditional model, but I think if you translate that into a more modern context, it's still very much and not to say that they don't have a place within the arts field, but very much like the gallery sort of artist relationship, and I think in that respect, the gallery is kind of the middleman because you do have that person purchasing through the gallery, but it's works of art that are created. For something specific, like another person or a commission or the city or I mean, you get the idea. Yeah. And so I would even argue, and I mean, this is, I'm not trying to be like radical, but I would even argue that as the looking into the myth of the starving artist, that if you are supporting yourself as an artist through another job, and you're creating art, and you're not able to find a way to sell that art, and in some ways you've become your own patron of your work, and it's a tough dynamic to break out of. Yeah. So I think so the other piece of that is museums and even larger cultural institutions. We've seen it happen several times in the last year. All across the United States are going away. They're declaring bankruptcy or their patronage is down. So I think right before we went on, we talked a little bit about how access to equipment that helps making art get out there online or digitized or whatever. I mean, we live in a great age for that. So. As that happens, there's more and more people that are not just doing art, but interested in art in a different way that we've defined it. They're not necessarily going to a museum, but they're going to go to a local festival. They're going to see dance in the street. They're going to see, buskers in New York
or on YouTube.
Yeah, and that's how they're consuming art. In fact, I think it was the National Endowment for the Arts conducted a study. I should double check that. It may have been Americans for the Arts. I think it was Americans for the Arts. But there was a study. My brain. There was a study. Somewhere. Where they asked, in a survey, people in the United States, like, how often did you participate in an art event over the last, I think, maybe year or two, and they gave very specific definitions of art, performing arts, museum, gallery, whatever. The traditional way of when we think of arts and culture. Mm-hmm. And I think it came back like 1/4 of the United States, actually participated, in some type of cultural event. Including movies? No, I don't know that they did. I don't think that they did, because they redefined that. And they added in internet content, and I think film was one of the additions. And then it came back 3/4 of the American population were participating in some art. It's just different. It's just different. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the definition was broader. So I think with that in mind, going in, there's some really great museums and some really great exhibits in Atlanta, and I think some of the museums that we have in Atlanta, the Center for Civil and Human Rights is, I think, a great example of really bringing people into a building, but giving them a multi-dimensional experience. But I think the traditional, I'm going to go and stand in front of a painting, may or may not have any context for it, is dying.
Certainly.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. I was just listening to an interview by a musician called Christine. Mm-hmm. You familiar with him? Mm-hmm. He's been with a band called Nego Creek since he was like 6. Mm-hmm. But anyway, brilliant mandolin player. And he was talking about how when you go to a concert and hear classical music on the radio, everyone's so reserved. It's the audience, not the performers that are so reserved.
Right.
And he was at a concert and watched somebody play something, and they just like nailed it. He's like,
Yeah.
and everyone was like, shh. And they were so much louder than he was, and not paying attention when they were doing that. And he's like, how is it that you can go to a Radiohead concert, which is just as intense, and like when they nail it, they nail it, but everyone's like, yeah, like enjoying it, and then there's like this, I don't know, this weird thing that happens.
I think there may be a name for that. I think it's called threshold syndrome.
Okay.
And so it's actually when you walk into a building like a museum or maybe even a symphony hall, that there's a certain decorum that has to be in place, and a certain way to behave, a certain way to dress, a certain, and for people, particularly people in disadvantaged communities who have not had arts education or access to art, that can be a very intimidating
or off-putting.
Off-putting, yeah. I think, I mean, even for a lot of people, it can be off-putting. So yeah, it's this idea that, the four walls of a building can be one of the greatest deterrents to that access. So you could make it free all day long, but actually walking into that building, there's some hesitation there. So more people are wanting to participate in art that's in their community. And I don't mean in urban communities, I mean in rural communities, I mean, Saltinicucci is a great example of there's a production, I think, that was very much involved with the community called Swamp Gravy, and it's done.
Swamp Gravy?
Yeah.
That's a cool name.
Yeah.
Swamp Gravy.
But it's good work, and it's work that has united a community, and so there's been this, I think, this sort of tension between what we consider high art and what we consider low art, and high art being, again, more of that patron artist model, and low art being things that are maybe like a folk artist or people who are self-taught. Yeah. And I think that what Doug Borwick, I think, argues, or at least presents in building communities, not audiences, is that it's a no longer relative argument, right? Because it's not really about the art all the time. Sometimes it's about the experience, and so he breaks it into visceral art, not versus, but exists on its own plane, and then there's reflective art. And so
it's like the time, so when you are looking at a painting, seeing what it inspires within you.
Yeah. And I think, it's you may, if you are, for example, first generation immigrant in the United States, and you're going over to a museum, you may not have context for a very Western display of, right. Yeah, I mean, you may appreciate it and maybe like, that's beautiful and the colors are amazing and the strokes, you can see the strokes in the artwork, but we've been removed a little bit from the context,
Right.
So, but whereas visceral art is really about this sort of experience, this thing that's, taps into more senses. It's an experience rather than just a very passive observation of art. And so it's not a value judgment. It's not saying one's better than the other. It's just saying it's different. And just looking at trends, the United States tends to be going more towards wanting and seeking out visceral art. And so if we're not providing those experiences, then obviously we're going to see our patronage shrink.
Of course, because patrons want to see the art that they want to see, right?
Right. Yeah. And there's a whole lot in that book about shifting demographics and in the United States. So it's very meaty. But that's been an influence of mine thinking about, as a service organization that thinks about arts entrepreneurship, how does that affect us? And why? Why should I care? And
Definitely.
So just kind of grappling and answering those questions from within has been a task of mine, I think.
For sure. It's so interesting when I think about art, how it can be like, so back in the Renaissance or whatever, there weren't cameras. And so the artist was, if it was painting, whatever, they were drawing a person to realisticness. And then the camera came along, alleviating that responsibility from the artist and allowing just anything, it could be whatever. And in the same way, I think if we figure out a way to use art to make sustaining ourselves beautiful, whether it's in permaculture, whatever, find that medium, then everyone will have everything they need and they can spend time doing whatever art they want without having to worry about getting things working they want.
Yeah, I mean, a big conversation that's been happening in the arts, there was an article in HowlRound Theater blog, I think it's a blog, but they all, HowlRound is specifically for theater, and then what they do is have articles about social change, social justice, and so forth. And one of them was about this, oh gosh, I'm going to lose my thought here. It was this idea of, it was called The Matrix. I just lost my thought, but God, what was that about? It was really, like how round, I'm trying to think of what this article is about, but at any rate, oh yes, it was about this idea of scarcity versus abundance. And we always, economics is based on this idea of scarcity. And I think the question is, what if we just tipped that a little bit and thought about what we have as artists, what we have as arts organizations, as a community that are abundance assets. So, one of the things that we have within in our space here is space.
Welcome.
Well, yeah. So what can you do with that space? And, we do have to earn money from the space, but we can also open it up to community events, community things like, neighborhood association meetings, gatherings, things like that, that are non-commercial in nature, but we're not charging them to be in the space. Because it's an asset that we have, and that we want that asset to be a part of the community. So thinking about, what are those things, even as an individual artist, what are those assets that you have that instead of thinking about currency, you think about sharing abundance versus working against each other in the spirit of scarcity.
Why are we competing rather than cooperating?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it's, yep. Are there any other things you want to talk about as far as issues impacting beyond the arts or beyond?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about GMOs, so.
Okay, you go there. What about? What's your take?
My take? I don't have a take. I have a, right now I'm in investigation mode. Because I think that, genetically modified organism, it's like, that's what tomatoes are. They're not an indigenous fruit to the United States, but yet we've cultivated the soil for years, same as we've done with corn and others, to get it to where it is now. It may not have been engineered by a large company like Monsanto, but we've even in some of the works of Shakespeare, there was these kind of arguments which express the sort of political tensions of the day, which was this idea of landscaping, landscaping versus just letting nature be nature. And that was kind of that GMO topic of their time, or even cloning topic, And going back, I think, in the late 90s, we were talking about cloning as this, or messing with nature, and is it right, and was it ethical, and what are the other possible repercussions for humanity?
So not necessarily cloning plants, but cloning
People or animals, yeah. So I think, I want to be conscious of the things that I put in my body and for my children as well. But it's interesting. So, I'm reading about, and I think nobody would argue that, big industry has hidden information before me. Some of the tobacco companies.
Wow.
Yeah.
The meatpacking industry.
Yes, yeah. Upton Sinclair. So I mean, there's definitely a reason for us to be skeptical of a system that isn't checked.
Yeah, totally. People confuse me because they know that's a thing, just like we know it is with politics and every other large organization of any kind. It's impossible to share everything, or it was before, pre-internet. So the idea that you're just going to trust what they say, I mean, I'm all for offering anyone the opportunity to make their case. Like, I'll listen.
Right.
But if you fucked up in the past, then I want to know. Are you still doing that?
Yeah, you're still doing that.
No?
Yeah. I think that what I tried to look or have been looking at, and haven't really been like thoroughly investigating this, but just over the Thanksgiving break started looking into what's happening with wheat and other products. And I think when I started just kind of doing a Google search and starting somewhere, it kind of takes you down the rabbit hole. And I thought, it'd be really interesting to see what your farmers say. Mm-hmm. Why do they purchase these seeds? From Monsanto that has the not only the plant seed in it, but the insecticide, the fertilizer, all of that built in. And there was a really interesting argument, I think, where one person blogging about it was saying that yes, the seeds are expensive. And yes, there's some weird, legal things about patent where you can't use the same seeds in the next crop, in the next cycle. But the money that they save in only having to run a tractor across the field, once versus 3 times is immense. And there's less shipping of those gases to the farmers and less time. And one farmer said that it keeps, actually just by planting a seed and having it all in one, it keeps his field workers, his employees working in the field from being exposed to the spray that they would normally have to use. So it was an interesting take on that. It was an interesting take on why a farmer would.
Still a relatively uneducated view on it, but I understand the perspective.
Why do you say uneducated?
Well, for one, that pesticide that's now permanently in the seed is the reason the bees are dying. Part of it, they already figured that out in France in the 90s. And banned it.
Yeah.
On top of that, by having genetically modified seeds like that, they spread through pollination, going to other farmers. And if those farmers get sued.
Because I remember that. That's like really creepy.
But that definitely is one benefit. That is legitimate, there's less work because of that. But of course, monocropping like that is completely inefficient anyway. So
I think for some of the farmers that we're talking about this, you're talking about somebody who's worked the land since they were, able to walk, generations of farming, and so there is a lot of science that goes into farming, and so I don't want to discount that voice. And some of them talked about rotating crops, doing crop rotation and stuff like that. So they are. I don't think from one farmer's perspective, is it doesn't do them any good to create crappy products.
Oh, absolutely.
But I think it's something to definitely keep thinking about, and I think even just from a health perspective, cutting back on carbs.
On carbs?
Yeah, it's not depending on the type of carb that you're eating, it's, I lost 10 pounds, I think, in changing my diet. I did put in exercise, but I have been exercising. And when I started looking at my diet, making change in diets, that's actually when the weight started coming on a lot faster. And it wasn't that I don't believe in any diet, I think, where they make you cut out everything, unwilling, if you're not willing to do that. I still eat pasta, but I think it's really small choices about going out to eat and they bring you a basket of bread and it's like, do you really need that basket of bread before you eat this other meal? Or can you opt for a salad or, some other choice besides, carbs? So I'm not an Atkins fanatic.
Right.
Yeah. But and also I think, I love beer, so cutting back on beer, I think.
It's hard on I like a good beer. Have you tried kombucha? Have you tried that? It's like a fermented tea, but it's got because it's fermented, it's good for your gut bacteria.
Right. Yeah.
But the nice thing about it for me is that it different flavors can, because it's bubbly and fermented, can taste a little bit like beer. So sometimes it's like a little something I'll take. It's like, I don't mind drinking this.
Yeah. I mean, those substitutes, right? Mine was like, soda water, just having something to drink. Yeah.
Definitely.
So yeah, the GMO thing it's still looking at it. It's still looking for different perspectives, and it, I haven't really gone in with one or the other. I just like to see and think about, what are the arguments, and if there's something that I strongly agree with or disagree with, how does that affect my life? What do I do about that? Maybe it's just making a change in diet or where I decide to purchase wheat products.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much information out there, it's hard to really sift through and be able to look yourself in the eye and say, I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Much.
I think that's even, I think the thing about research and even, a hypothesis or a theory, I mean, the idea behind science is that I don't think any scientist would say, yes, 100% we're right, we know for a fact.
Right.
All they can do is look at causation, and even that's really hard, so correlation.
Yeah, all they can really say is that of the information we have, this is our best guess.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, I know a lot of people that just think that they know what they're talking about. And they figured out some clever thing because of the way it was articulated in an article or a video.
Right.
And they feel like they
know. Right. It's the kind of idea where it's cold here, so global warming must not exist.
Clearly, yeah. But hey, I mean, we all have different perspectives and whatever, so I try and just okay.
Yeah.
Let's try and work together.
Yeah. Choose your battles.
One thing in your research I would check out is, have you heard of permaculture?
I have, but I'm not. I don't seem to be as familiar with it as I would like to be.
So, just a little overview. Permaculture is a design science. It's they take systems in nature, figure out how it works, and then try and design systems that have the least amount of input from humans and are the most productive for both ourselves, the soil, the animals, and everything.
Yeah. Okay.
And you can grow 6,000 pounds of fruits and vegetables a year on a quarter acre in Pasadena, California, with minimal input.
You just treat the soil, right?
Yeah, acknowledge that it has bacteria, it has those things you need, mycelium.
Yeah.
But it can be very simple too. It's fascinating what we can do. They went to Jordan and they turned this desert into there's all sorts of fruit in abundance, and the soil is desalinating, and it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
It's not hard, it's just thinking about something.
Right. Yeah. But thinking about what we're doing and being profitable sometimes are hard, but.
Well, even so, if you're minimizing your input, then
that's true. Yeah. So I guess the status quo is hard to change. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think the real problem is that farmers have gotten up to scale, have invested in an infrastructure that they're currently coping with. Yeah. Changing from that after you've invested is what people don't want to do. Yeah. Even if it's the best choice.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? I definitely am familiar with that. My grandfather has a cattle ranch in Kansas. And so growing up, I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then I realized that's not how all farms are. And then I realized not only can it be worse, like factory farming, but it can be so much better. Like some of these, there's a farmer named Joel Salatin, or something Salatin. Pretty sure it's Joe Salatin, something like that. But anyway, he has a farm called Polyface Farms, and they do such efficient things. He can take, I think it's 10 acres, however much of just like scrub land, like completely
Yeah.
overgrown, grow pigs, and net $60K a year with minimal effort,
Wow.
just by doing it correctly.
Yeah.
It's just, it blew my mind. Because you see my grandfather's farm, like, I rounded up cattle on horseback.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
to see
really?
this is
Yeah.
like, this is so simple, and it works, and it's good for everything.
Yeah.
Why are we not doing this? I don't understand.
Yeah. Maybe you have a life ahead of you in farming.
You think so?
Yeah. Yeah, my only really, I plant a couple of things a year. I used to do tomatoes a lot, but I think year round we just take care of a couple of hens, and
They're excellent garbage disposals.
they are actually. We throw a lot out there too. That's all healthy stuff, but they like watermelon rinds are thrown out there, and just like food and stuff like that. That I gave them some vegetables from like a stew beef that we had, and they love it. Keeps them. They get bored too, so we'll throw like a bale of hay out there and just let them like take it apart, like
Totally, just for fun.
just for fun, yeah, just to keep them happy. We kind of feel like they're happy, and then they'll lay great eggs. But they're amazing eggs, so good.
Birds fascinate me too, because their eyes can see electromagnetic activity.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, you wonder how birds can find their way whenever they're migrating. It's because they can see.
Yeah,
things in the
yeah,
air.
they see the patterns of the things that exist, in the atmosphere. Yeah, it's my fascination is I think dogs, like what they know. I mean, we're not necessarily discounted for a long time, but just kind of thought of as like, not a really smart animal. And now there's so much research about how they communicate with us and with each other and how they've learned, everything about humans. It's just amazing.
Yeah, we haven't cultivated them. They've cultivated us.
Yes.
They're like, oh,
Yeah.
you'll do all the work? Okay.
Yeah. I think somebody said that, just the tipping point, I think, between what became the wolf and then the middle for what is now the domestic dog, just this observation of I can come back and get food. And it's like that trait or whatever it is. It's like we have too many dogs, too many dogs that don't have homes, and yet wolves are, on the verge of extinction for some species. So
Yeah, well, and the crazy part is because we've bred out all of that fear of humans, in places not the U.S., like, say, Russia, stray dogs are forming these packs, and they have no fear of humans. They're totally attacking them like crazy. It's like, whoa,
yeah,
we should pay attention to the
super dogs.
consequences of our actions. But that's where boars came from, too. They're like, Europeans brought pigs, and then they let them loose because there was no way to fence them in before.
Pigs gone wild. Well, that's like wild horses too. Like, right? I mean,
We're the reason the Mustangs are here.
Yeah.
And totally cleared out the plains before Europeans even made it there, so we have no idea what it would look like before. It's crazy.
Yeah, I have horses. Well, my in-laws have horses, and they have a horse that I ride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an experience, though.
It is.
Writing something with a mind of its own.
Yeah, it is. It's different, than I didn't have writing lessons. My father-in-law got some horses and was like, "Get up on the horse." And was like, "Okay."
On a horse.
Yeah. I did try to take some writing lessons, it was like they were teaching a very English style, dressage and. Which is fine. I mean, some of the basics, and get acclimating yourself to being on an animal, and just being comfortable with that is really important when you're writing. But it was kind of funny because I was in my 30s and I'm in classes with 12 to 16-year-olds who know how to do it so much better than I. So yeah, it is definitely an experience.
It's that whole world. Horses, and people get really into it because you can just the idea of becoming in tune with another living creature is an experience in itself.
Yeah, there's a book called Centered Writing that's kind of about that. It was written from she was diagnosed with scoliosis, and it was the one sport, writing that made you use both sides of the body equally at the same time.
So it helped balance out.
It helped balance out. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I can dig that.
Yeah. But she uses a lot of kind of Eastern philosophies in talking about learning to ride, using soft eyes instead of hard eyes and breathing and basically centered on an animal so you do become one with them. So the subtle movements that you have in the body cue them in different ways. It's pretty amazing. The horses that we ride they're not trained for that. They know some, slow down and don't run into that tree.
But you develop the language between them.
Yeah. I don't ride enough to develop that. It's a regret of mine, but one day.
I have this experience I had when I was little where, that's weird. So my grandfather, I only got to go there in the summers. So when I went, he had this one horse that used to be a barrel racing horse.
Oh yeah.
So it's very much
horse, right? So a quarter horse.
I'm not sure.
Kind of big horse. Yeah.
Well, it was a little bit shorter than most of the other ones.
Oh, okay.
But it was designed like it had been bred to full speed.
Right. Yeah.
And I had never galloped before. Like the most I'd ever done was a little bit of trotting, but it was mostly walking because I was still new at it.
Yeah.
And there's like this little place where you could, in Kansas, everything's grid. There's like one paved road and a bunch of gravel roads.
Right.
Came off the gravel road, went up the paved part to get to this place. And the horse just like took off and ran. And I was terrified. I'd never gone that fast, so I was like squeezing harder and harder, which made him go faster.
Yeah.
It was weird because he actually pulled me through that fear of going faster than I thought I was.
Yeah.
And I was comfortable running up to that. It was weird.
I think the interesting thing is the thing that you have to keep in mind when you decide they want to run is that they sprint. So you're not going to run forever. Just keep your head down. They're not going to run into anything that's going to hurt them. If you keep at the same level as them,
they're going to be good.
They're going to be good. You just hold on for your life. Yeah.
So let's scoot to future. Future is one of my favorite parts. This is where we get to look at what could be. So let's start with, what do you think the next 5 years are going to look like, just from what you've seen?
Well, I mean, I think that's going to be, so I'll kind of start big. I mean, I think in the United States, we'll definitely have, in as far as art, I'm going to focus on art. There'll be some challenges with funding.
Mm-hmm.
I think kind of moving in locally, I think that despite those challenges, I think we've hit a point of resurgence in art and different modes of not just creation but distributing our art.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that will just continue to accelerate. Hopefully, if we build the right infrastructure now. So I think that's the challenge that we have right now to support the next 5 years. For C4 Atlanta, I mean, the next 5 years, I think is you get to that 5 year mark, we're coming up on that for us, and it's like, well, this is very critical. It's critical to make it 5 years. And then it's like, okay, well, the next 5 years are also really critical, in terms of growth. Yeah.
Thinking about where you're going to go.
Right, and the acceleration in terms of what programs you're creating may slow down. But now, I think we've created as many programs as we could possibly create with the staff that we have. So now it's like, how do we round it out a little bit, And I think for, is that your?
That is my parking, yeah. So, all right, be right back. All right, parking check.
Yay!
So let's just finish up what you think the next 5 years should look, or what you want to see us focus on in the next 5 years.
Okay. I think as an arts community, for the next 5 years, focusing more on organic and genuine engagement, I think is going to be really important. I think training is going to be important for artists. Obviously, C4 Atlanta, I'm a big proponent of empowering artists with entrepreneurial training. But I think also there's specific skill sets that need to continue to be offered, for artists to continue to hone their aesthetic, creative as part of their creative offering, And just some other just basic skills, I read an article recently about the top, I think it was like the top 5 skills needed in Georgia right now because of um, because of the sort of robust film industry that we have.
It's growing.
Yeah, but unfortunately, some of the skills are not here in Georgia, and the film companies want to hire Georgians to do that work, but they're having to bring in people from California or other states to do that work. So things like that, like having a very, I think even at the university level, at the community service organization level, like C4, thinking about what artists and people in the creative fields really need, so that they can earn a living making art.
Definitely. That makes sense. Well, it's lovely that they have something like C4 to help with that.
Try, yeah.
A little bit, right?
Yeah. Hopefully one day we'll be, our vision is that every artist in Atlanta earn a living making art. And once we reach that goal, we'll be irrelevant, so.
Some of the greatest models that are like people I like that do whatever to help people, their most desired thing is to be redundant and unnecessary.
Right, yeah.
Which I like. Yeah. Okay, so I'd like to wrap these up with just a lighter note.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you want to do in the next 5 years? Just you.
Me? I'm actually going to be pursuing an MBA.
Okay.
So looking at an MBA over at Georgia State, doing some more traveling, like personally. I'm doing some traveling this year, but I think my kids are going to be out of school or close to out of school. Just it's going to be a completely different shift. I think I've spent most of my adult life raising kids, and so I'm really looking forward to that time that my husband and I have to refocus some of our energies on that different path.
Definitely.
Kids will still be around.
Yeah. They got their own lives.
They have their own lives to live, yeah.
Nice. Good deal. Okay. Well, thank you for coming on. Is there anything you'd like to plug, like the website for C4? Or?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Should be better at that. If you're interested in learning more about C4 Atlanta, we're really easy to find. We're c4atlanta.org. That's O-R-G. If you want to reach out to any of our staff members, you can email us at actionteam@c4atlanta.org, and we're always happy to answer questions and include people more in what it is that we're doing.
Good deal.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much for being on. I appreciate it, and I know you have to go, so you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thanks, Heath. Thanks for having me on.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you next time.